Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here and perhaps even sewing with me today. Last week we did this log cabin block and we learned some things about what we liked and what we didn't like. I had comment. I always appreciate comments, by the way, just saying that a lot of people liked the narrower strips, but there were some who were okay with the wider and the narrower strips together. And there was a suggestion that could try slicing it in half, which I think would be great. We might explore that at some point. Suggested doing it horizontally, which I think would be kind of interesting. And then what could we pair that with on the other half? So if we cut it in half, then, sorry, you're getting to see the next step here. Then what could we put up here that might complement it, but not necessarily be the same kind of block cut in half as well? So that might be something to explore. Anyway, this is a fun block. It was fun to do. It's a lot of sewing because you're inserting these things in. Oh, there was also a suggestion to mix these prints so that I'd have a different dark black and white print here in each of these spots, which I think, is a great idea. Certainly would use up scrap. So thank you for those comments and suggestions. Oh, and I think Michelle mentioned that she had done log cabins where she doesn't do the diagonal light corner, dark corner, which I'm thinking, is that like, no, that's not Boston square, is it? It's still, I think, a log cabin because it's just the going around thing. If you do the two narrow sides and then the two longer sides, the two shorter sides and longer sides, then that's courthouse steps. So Boston Common, not Boston Square, Boston Common. But I think that actually has individual squares. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure that's probably a log cabin of some sort. But traditionally, log cabins have been light and dark for the light corner of the cabins and the darker corner of the cabins, and then the center was either red or yellow to signify the fire in the fireplace. So, but of course there are all kinds of variations, and it's been a long time, frankly, since I did a more traditional log cabin, but I love them. I really do love the traditional ones too. But this week I confess that I played some more. In that particular block, I preferred the narrower strips, pretty narrow strips. So I thought about pretending that, showing you how to do this and pretending that I didn't try it ahead of time, but that would destroy my track record if I have no idea what the heck I'm going to do, how it's going to turn out. So I did last week play with this a little bit afterwards. And I opted to use the solid black and the solid white just because I thought that would make things pop more and would draw the eye more to the bright pieces, which is what I wanted, rather than looking at the many wonderful black and white prints. So I opted to do this in just solids, well, solid black and white. And then I did some pretty narrow strips here, as you can see. And I really like this combination a lot. There's a part of me that would like these to be like little bits in little squares here. And so I think that's what I'm going to try today. I really like this version of the block a lot. I'm finding lots of versions of log cabins. I should write a book or something, I guess. All right. So your comments on this are welcome, of course. And so today, what I would like to do is still alternating light and dark, and I'm going to use the black and white just because I have some strips already cut, some from last week and a couple more that I added on. And I would like to make these just little specks in here. So it wouldn't be the full width of the strip, just have little specks in there. And I could certainly piece those individually and splice them in. But in case I want to make several of these blocks, I think I will do strip sets. And they'll be short strip sets because I don't need 5,000 of little bitsy oranges in the middle of black. So I want to try that. I'm not even sure, do I want to vary the width of these strips going around? Not sure about that. But a second idea I had was to, when I started thinking about these strip sets, where I'd have, grab a couple here. So I'd have a better pressed strip of black. And they would not have to be the same width on both sides. That's really, sorry, you'll forgive that, won't you? And then in between, I would have a strip of bright. Just a little bitsy bit of bright. I will probably mostly use solids, but we'll try it. And then have that be one of the strips. So when I'm doing the little specks, then I would slice these and use those to make the little specks on the cabin walls. But then the other side, I thought, what if I just use the strip set and cut whatever length I need? And then it would have, I guess, the effect of having more logs on that side. But if they're bracketed by the same color, either black or white, I think that would be kind of cool. So rather than do two different blocks that way, I want to try combining them. So I think I want the specks to be against the black because I'm going to use brights, and I think they will show up better against the blacks, those little tiny bits. And for the strips then, I guess I should have done this in the first place. That one's a little better pressed. And then have the strips be with white on the other side, because there will be more of the brights then to stand out against the white. You know, an interesting thing to do would be to have, say, this fabric and have it in all of the logs on the lighter side, and then use solids of these different colors in the print over on the dark side. Oh gosh, so many choices. Ordinarily, I would do just solids because I'm more of a solids person, but I know some of you really like prints. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, I think. You could also do that with, say, a stripe, and I would do the stripe this direction. Oops, sorry. And which I think would be kind of fun. And then use these colors. So I could do different blocks with different prints, but basically the same colorway. And my basic colorway is bright everything. So that would make kind of an interesting quilt. So let's start off using this one, which is one of my favorite prints ever, and I should go on Etsy or eBay or something and see if I can get some more of it. Just love it. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is create this strip, and probably will just make it, no, I better make it the full length, because if this is going to be the same print in all of the logs on that one side, I'm going to need more of it. And then I have my tub of, sorry, I keep bumping the table, of my scraps, not the larger scraps, larger pieces. And I will use those to make strips with the black. And then I will come back when we have those strips. Here are the results of my endeavors. I think I found some pretty good matches for that fabric, and they aren't going to be right next to it anyway. The only one that's a little bit off maybe is the yellow, but the paler yellow just makes it all look too dull. All right, now as I was doing this, a couple of thoughts came to mind, and they're fairly unrelated, but that's my brain. When I was thinking about other fabrics that I could use, other prints, because I don't have much of this left, I thought about Cape Facet. And for those of you who like Cape Facet fabrics, many of those I think would work pretty well. They've got lots of color in them. So I think that would be a good choice for that. And you could certainly find enough Cape Facet to make as large a quilt as you want. The other question actually was, what do I want to use for the center of this piece? Now, I could use any solid color. I could use black, I could use white, I could use a black and white print, although that's a non-starter for me on this one. I could do a split, as I did here, between the black and white. But I think I'm going to use this because it will tie everything together pretty well and put a little more emphasis on this print. And then these are, so this is kind of the starring role, and then these are the supporting players. I also, when I made these strips, I made one side narrow and the other side I used a wider strip, partly because that's what I had in strips, but also because I can trim these down to make this resulting strip narrower. But I wouldn't be able to take narrow strips and make them wide. Well, I could, but it'd have a bunch of extra seams in there. So these will likely be trimmed down. And remember, these are the pieces that are going to be inserted into the black strips on the dark side. So say I wanted a little tiny blip here. I'm going to cut this a little larger so I can trim that side. So I'm going to cut a piece that's going to be wide enough to take the seam into account, but it's going to still be a pretty small blip. And then I will have that in the middle of a black strip, and this I know I'm going to be trimming down. So it would be, so I can do it this way, it will be inserted in here, so it's just a little bit of bright in there. And then again, I could do this on a wider strip than I think I want, just because I know I can trim it down if I want to. I can also, I might put this one close to one edge, although that's too close, the seam would catch it up, and one that's closer to that edge so they can be scattered, which is the look that I'm going for. That would require that this be a fairly wide strip, of course, but I don't want to line them up exactly. For one thing, I can't, because these are going to be different widths here. So these are different widths, so I wouldn't be able to line those up. I suppose I could center them, but that's not, you know, that's not my style. So then maybe I'll take a pink one, and this one will probably be quite narrow because it's a little tiny blip. All right, I have to have at least 1/2 inch for the seam, but this is going to be a very tiny little blip, and I am okay with that. And then this will be cut according to the length that I need on that side. This will probably do a little bit of custom cutting and inserting here, just so that I don't run into awkwardness on the corners where I come to a corner. I'm in the middle of one of those. So first thing I'm going to do is to cut a piece of this for the center, and I'm going to make the sides all parallel just because I want to see how this works. You could certainly make them irregular, and you could put these at an angle, all kinds of choices, but I want to start out with just the basic stuff today, and then frankly I want to see what you guys have for ideas. So let me get this piece cut, and I think we're going to start with this piece. No, I think we're going to start with a black piece. So we'll do a little scatter piece on the dark, a dark scatter. So I'll have, yes, cut that piece, and then we'll come back and we can decide on length and size and all of that. Now, given the size of this piece, I'm not going to be able to fit, well, I could if they were really packed, but then they aren't going to look very, well, I don't know, because these are going to end up being narrower, of course. I think I will do 2 of them in this first round. And I'll make one cut here. Kind of mark it with my thumb. Try to make that a straight cut. And no, because I'm going to, no, I won't lose that. I'm going to make it a little wider here. And then sew this piece in, probably more toward the bottom here a little bit. And then we'll come back and figure out how we want to do the rest of this, because the seams, of course, are going to change everything. I have queued this up on to the rest of the strip here, because with the seam in there, it will be easier for me to gauge where I want this to be. And I'm not anticipating that this strip is necessarily going to be this wide, so I want to give myself some room to trim. And I'll need to, so I want that plus 1/4 inch for a seam. So let's do it about there. And again, I could do this at an angle if I wanted to. Lots of choices here, and I will look forward to hearing what choices you would make. Okay, so I will sew that and then sew this on, and we will size it up to that side. That about there. Now there is some waste here of the black because I keep trimming things, but you could do a consistent width and then you wouldn't have to do so much of that. But I'm just experimenting with the concept here. Sorry, I zoomed in and then I didn't compensate for that. All right, so I'm going to stitch that and this, and we'll come back and do the first side. And here's our first scatter strip, which we can now cut to the width that we want, and then I'll have to decide on this width. This is very hard. The length, and this is the width. I think I want this narrower. I think. The width is, the length is already determined. So I am going to cut this with a little bit of extra just so I have a chance to square things up and trim it. And I want to make sure that I'm keeping things square as I go. This is not my ideal way to make a log cabin, but this isn't your ordinary log cabin. So I'm going to give it a little bit. I want to square it up with Okay, when I trim it up, I will square that better. All right, there's a seam for our first scatter, and I will trim this a little. Not much, because I still want that to show, so I have to give it at least 1/4 of an inch. And I'm trying to line it up with these edges of these scatter pieces so that everything will look straight. If I were not aiming for straight, of course, I could go as wonky as I like. All right, I will stitch this on, and then I'll make a scatter piece for this side. Here are our 2 scattered logs, and I'm very happy with those. Now I'm ready to do these, and I know that this needs to be narrower. So I'm going to cut this just about to size, a little oversized. Cut it straight in relation to the center strip. And then I want to trim this to be narrower. I almost kind of wish that was narrower too. I could fix that actually. Do I want to fix that? I could make the other one narrower, the next one. I'll leave them the same, but I do know that I want this trimmed down. So I'm going to do that, and then always remembering that I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance there to account for. And then I will decide what I'm going to do with this and put on this. And again, I think I might make that even a narrower piece. We'll see how it goes. We're just playing, right? I shall return. And now I am ready for another round. So 2 more sides of scattered bright on black, and then 2 more not 2 more sides. Well, yes, 2 more sides, and then 2 more sides of this strip set. I do like it narrower, I think, but we'll be able to tell better when we get more pieces on there. And you will end up with more of this side. So the color, or the side that you start with, will have less actual inches, I guess, than what you finish with, unless you come back and do an extra set of this, which I might do because I really want the scatter to be more prominent. And because this is white, that's going to draw the eye too. So we'll see how this goes, but I'll do another round here. Here is our finished block. I see that I got off kilter here, so I'm doing a bit of a wonky one without meaning to, but that's what our exploration block looks like. And these are quite different because of this configuration here. And I like the scattered effect for certain. So I think overall this was quite a successful endeavor. Here is the finished block, and I like it very much, actually. It will be interesting to see how it is when other blocks are put with it, and probably different ones of these. I am glad that I had the bits over here, the scattered bits, and then long strips in the middle over here, because If I had done scattered bits here, I think it would have been too much. But this adds interest. This is a little more calming for the eye. So I like this one very much. I don't know. It could, I suppose. I could alternate the blocks. Look at that. They're almost the same size. Who would have thought that would happen, huh? But they're not bad together. If I were doing a sampler of log cabin blocks, I think that would look fine. Interesting. But that is it for this week. Next week, I don't know. Something will come up, I imagine. And I hope I will see you then. If you haven't already and you like what you see here, please subscribe and hit the like button. As always, I welcome your comments for how you envision this, what you would do differently, or what you liked less. And I hope I will see you next week. Until then, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.